Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Korra comic review. This is going to be my full spoiler review for Legend of Korra Ruins of the Empire Part 2. The book is out today, November 12th, pretty much everywhere in that it's available digitally from all the usual platforms. You'll be able to find it in actual bookstores. The comic book store release date is actually tomorrow, but you know, effectively today is the full release date. So everyone has access to it, and yeah, so I did my non-spoiler review the other day, and in general got across the idea that it is a good book, but because it's a part 2, it doesn't really maybe deliver as much big content, notable moments as maybe I perhaps wanted, but it's still very good along the way. It's just that you sort of have to rely on a lot of smaller moments to really kind of deliver for you, rather than it really delivering on the big moments. So in that sense, I do think part 1 is probably a stronger overall book, kind of viewing them individually, in that there was just, I think, a few more intriguing scenes to start us off. This definitely sets the stage for part 3 very well, but it also puts a lot of pressure on part 3 to deliver, because across part 1 and 2 it has mainly been set up, and they haven't been willing to reveal really much of anything in terms of like secondary reveals or anything like that. I get you deliver your big content in the finale, but you can have moments that happen in the earlier books, and I think this probably needed something along those lines. But there's just about enough to kind of get us over the line here and make it a worthwhile read, definitely. It's a huge improvement over some of the more recent comics like Imbalance Part 3 and Team Avatar Tales. So let's get into discussing the details. So by now for the previews, you guys probably know how we start off. Wu and Korra go off to find Toph, meaning they have to go through the swamp. That leaves Mako, Bolin, Asami, and a couple of guards to guard over Kuvira, basically, because obviously they locked Kuvira back up in the sort of platinum restraint thing after she went a little overboard at the end of part 1. It turns out Guan is actually watching them, and the second Korra leaves, they launch their attack, and because they're fighting on the airship, that means Bolin can't actually fight because he's not a metal bender. The earth is outside the airship. He just has to kind of punch, kick, throw chairs and stuff like that. So eventually just the guards coming in from all sides overwhelm everyone, and during the fight, you know, Kuvira is saying, "Let me out, I can help, I want to help." But of course, Kuvira's character arc in this book is about the fact that, you know, she has to take responsibility for what she's done. Yes, she wants to improve and be better, but it's going to take time for people to trust her again. And so Asami being like, "I'm not falling for that." She thinks Kuvira is just trying to trick her to get out. Even though I think we as the audience kind of know Kuvira is being a bit sincere about this, you get why all the characters are a bit like, "Wait, did you do this?" Or like, "Are you planning something?" So the group gets captured. Kuvira is left kind of helpless just to watch everything as Guan walks in. So I think it's an interesting thing at the start of the book to just have the rest of the team get captured here the second Korra leaves. As for how they did the, I suppose, power level of the fight type thing, I think it was pretty well done, because you had basically taken the bending away from the most powerful bender there. Like, you know, it basically meant that Mako was your main bender there to fend off against all these kind of Earth Empire soldiers. And I think for a quick scene that was mainly to get across the idea they were overwhelmed, I don't feel that they overly like weakened the characters to make this happen. So it was pretty solid, but this is obviously how they're captured to prepare them for the brainwashing, of course. Everyone knows what's on the part 3 cover. Mako, Bolin, and Asami do indeed get brainwashed. We cut to the swamp, of course, where Wu and Korra are. And Wu, when he goes off to take a pee behind one of the vines in the swamp, actually has a vision in the swamp. And this is something I didn't expect the book to do. I didn't really expect them to keep Wu in as big of a sort of serious, focused upon character position in the book. And that's what we get here. He has a vision of Queen Hu Ting. And the dialogue here is pretty interesting in that it seems to, over the course of this book, suggest that the whole election plot it might actually not go ahead, but we'll get to it as we go through the book. The Avatar can't help you now. You've lost your way. You're nothing but a weak king and a disgrace to the throne. So it's a very cool scene here, as you can see here. Hu Ting, the vision of her speaking to Wu and him being very shocked and upset. But I entrusted you with my kingdom and you've made a mess of it. Wu says, no, I'm trying to change things and make the Earth Kingdom better. People don't want change. They don't care about progress. What they truly desire is stability. Wu says, what about freedom? People should have a say in who leads them. The Queen says, stop fooling yourself. You're only pushing for democracy because you're too scared to rule on your own. That's not true. After I died, you handed the Earth Kingdom right over to Kuvira. And now that you've finally regained the crown, you're ready to give it all away for power just like you did before. And Wu at this point is like, no, that's not true, it's not true. And that's when Korra comes over. So it is a very interesting scene in that Wu is questioning things after this. And they seem to be almost suggesting the idea of Wu didn't really give it a chance as king. He just immediately at the end of the series announced that I'm going to make this change and step down immediately. And I suppose the idea that they're getting across here is like that, yeah, do most of the people across the Earth Kingdom want this big of a massive change to just happen immediately after they've just sort of recovered from the chaos at the end of book 3? Do they immediately want a new kind of governing system straight away installed when Wu kind of has proven himself to be a decent leader and he could change things just as king without needing to change the entire system? That seems to be what they're sort of suggesting. It is interesting how they use this vision over the course of the book as we go on, in that you know, we'll get back to this in a second. You know, after that we have Guan and Kuvira talking, and this is where the brainwashing machine is introduced. You see, they're all strapped up to it. Dr. Sheng, and we get the first mention of Batar here. You know, Dr. Sheng used to work very closely with your former fiance, and we get the explanation of like where the technology of the brainwashing came from. You know, after Batar Jr. became the second in command, that's when Shang moved her research into the most effective methods to re-educate the prisoners at the re-education camps. She explains that she discovered the Dai Li had maintained order in Ba Sing Se for centuries by using enhanced indoctrination techniques. Kuvira notably is the one to say, you mean brainwashing. And she goes on and explains that the Dai Li's methods were unreliable, the subjects would often just revert to their old selves, so she began to experiment with magnetic waves to alter the brain, and by combining modern technology with ancient techniques, she was able to increase the effectiveness. So it's like a very, very technologically enhanced Dai Li brainwashing technique. So it almost in this explanation you maybe see how they will go about actually reversing it. It probably won't be as simple as, you know, just, you know, reminding someone of their past and they eventually break out of it. It's going to take something really, really big to actually make that breakthrough, and probably some counter technology as well. But Kuvira says, if I'd known this, I would have shut you down. I never authorized such inhumane experiments. And Dr. Shang's response is interesting, you know, maybe not directly, but don't act so naive. You demanded results from your followers. You never cared for how we achieved them. And she's like, that's not true. I hoped those who had gone astray would see the error in their ways. I wanted them to be motivated by my strength and leadership, not by some machine. So that is an interesting one in that, like, ultimately, yes, like Kuvira, I think the idea of brainwashing does kind of run a little counter to, in general, what she sort of wants. She prefers to sort of, she preferred in book 4 to sort of, I think, manipulate people and get across her dominance. The fact that she was able to get that manipulation done proved her strength and leadership. I don't think she would have gained, I don't think Kuvira would have any sort of pride in getting anything done with these ways. So I think there is truth behind Kuvira saying that she doesn't really agree with the idea of, you know, this sort of brainwashing. You know, it obviously begs the question of, you know, what was her intent behind the re-education camps, but like they say in the show, those things, you know, that's just the name of them. They weren't ever really, I think, meant to re-educate them. It was just, you know, basically using the people from other nations as slaves. But, you know, just before the brainwashing actually happens, you do get the line here, Asami, you have to know I didn't mean for any of this to happen. So I do like believe Kuvira when she is trying to help them. She doesn't want this to happen, because she is trying to help them. She's trying to gain their trust, and you know, Korra has given Kuvira a chance, and she doesn't want to waste that. And she knows, of course, that was emphasized in part one a lot. Kuvira notices how loyal the team is to Korra and Korra is to the team. So this happening, she knows, is a very, very bad thing. She doesn't want this to be the case. But anyway, next scene of note is Wu and Korra actually arrive at Toph's and immediately go about explaining that, okay, you know what happened at the end of book 4, you know, what are we going to do here next? So basically, Toph goes on to explain that, you know, Aang, Katara and Sokka lived for all that political hoo-ha. Me, I always saw the government as a giant pool of mud. Anyone who falls into it is going to come out filthy. They tried to say, you know, you're incorruptible. That's exactly why we want you on board. And Toph is just like, you know, I hate being around people. Why do you think I'd want to, like, you know, be of service to people, basically? And it's just like, but it's Gao Ling. I hated growing up there. And this is when Korra is like, Wu gets really down. Is like, I think it was a mistake coming here. Maybe Auntie Hu Ting was right after all. And Korra seems to latch on to something like, the vision is the way to get Toph on board. And so they start whispering. Toph suddenly becomes interested. And Korra just says, okay, I just told the swamp vision Wu saw on our way here. I told him to ignore it. And Toph freaks out and is like, what? That's terrible advice. The swamp is very wise. Sit, tell me everything. The way Wu says it here, I saw the former Earth Queen. She got me doubting my plan to make the Earth Kingdom a democracy. Korra like leans in, like knowing that this is going to be the big thing. And what else did she say? That people don't really want change. Don't really want change is full bolded, that this is the intent of the line, that people don't want change. And Toph is like, oh, is that so? And then Wu says, she also insisted that people would much rather stick to what feels safe and secure than do anything outside their comfort zone. And then Korra says, didn't you once tell me that the swamp will teach you what you need to learn if you're open to listening? Did I say that? I hate it when I'm right. Fine, I'll run for governor. And it's like, wait, what just happened here? Like, what about these lines suddenly convinced Toph from being like, I don't like being around people, I'll run? Like, I get the idea of like Toph trusts the swamp's visions. That's older Toph fully believes in this stuff. She's enlightened in that way. I don't really get the intent that they're going for here. Again, the bolded lines, which always give us the intent of the scene if you get confused with maybe some of where the overall text is going. Don't really want change, safe, secure, outside their comfort zone. And the fact that this was said to Wu, not Toph, but they're suddenly saying, oh, Toph, this applies to you? Are they trying to say that Toph needs to do something outside her comfort zone? Is that how they're convincing her? Or what? Because otherwise, like, the way to interpret this is that, like, Wu should just be king, was the interpretation for Wu. But I think there was a little bit of, like, disconnect here in terms of, like, they needed to explain this a little bit more, of just make it clear, really clear, what the intent is. Like, what does Korra get from what Wu said that suddenly latches on to Toph will go if we agree to this? It's just a bit like, I get the intent overall, the nuance and detail of it I'm not entirely sure about. But anyway, the other scene that we get here is, of course, you know, we get the actual brainwashing. It has happened. They're all obeying everything that is said to them. And then go on is like, next, Kuvira, put her in the chair. So this is Kuvira's chance to escape. As they take her out of the metal thing and before they put the cuffs on, Kuvira uses this as an opportunity to escape. And she says, I may have surrendered to the Avatar, but I'm not about to surrender to you. And so she manages to use her metal bending to escape. You know, it's this desperate escape attempt. She takes the entire, you know, Earth Empire army by surprise. She creates a bit of a distraction, and in the meantime has managed to change into an Earth Empire outfit and escapes by just driving one of the jeeps basically out out along with the rest of everyone. So it's a really clever escape from Kuvira. Gets across, you know, her entire skill set here, basically all in one. She can kind of do it all. And so she kind of is out in the middle of nowhere on her own. Effectively, you know, she is free. She has a car basically right there, Satomobile, whatever you want to call it. She could escape and be free at this point. But she decides to actually do what she said she was going to do. And I think that is a big moment for Kuvira. She notices that in the car she stole, there is a radio. And she says, you were there for me once, and what does she say? I only hope you'll be there for me again. And either side of her saying this is where we get the flashback for this volume. It's less than 2 pages. It's basically 2 3/4 pages here, which is more or less the exact same amount of flashback that we got in part 1, which was just a really quick one with, you know, Kuvira kind of broke something. Apparently her parents blamed her for it. She got really mad and said, I didn't do it. And they were just very upset with her, and she kind of ran away. Now we see what happens here is that it seems to be her father here. Your mother and I have tried to get through to you, Kuvira, but you refuse to listen. You have no discipline and no remorse for what you did. There's a master metalbender here who agreed to take you off our hands. Hopefully she can knock some sense into you. And remember, this is for your own good. Sue walks out of Zaofu and says, you must be Kuvira. It's nice to meet you. My name is Su Yin, but you can call me Sue. You'll be safe here, I promise. Sue puts out her hand, and Kuvira takes it. It is a very nice scene. This page here. It is a very nice scene here, just the hand coming out, getting to see that younger Su Yin, see the moment where they met for the first time. And it's the scene that confirms to us that, okay, they were her actual parents, and they did actually abandon her. They gave her away. They couldn't handle her behavior from their point of view and decided to just give her to Su Yin. Because, you know, again, you sort of wonder how was this organized, but either way, Su Yin was willing to take her in. And Kuvira remembers this as a kind of turning point. You were there for me once during this, you know, terrible experience, you know, as her parents abandoned her. She gained stability from living with Sue, and I suppose that's where part 3 really has to deliver now on how did things change then once she was, you know, in place in Zaofu as, you know, Sue's adopted daughter effectively. How did things change to the point where she did what she did in book 4, like in between book 3 and 4? That's kind of what we're waiting for here. We're getting the groundwork here. But so far, you know, as of just this far into the book, all it's done is just clarify to us that, okay, the whole, you know, orphan type story, here's the full clarification on that. Here's how Kuvira came to be with Sue. It's just showing us a little bit of what we were already told, not really giving us any of the real depth in terms of, okay, after this point, was Sue a good mother to Kuvira, or did Kuvira act out a little bit more? We'll have to see on that. But either way, I suppose the interpretation you're meant to have of that is you're meant to ask yourself, was Kuvira truly at fault? Was she truly like flawed back then, that young? Or was it just that her parents were pretty terrible and were so strict and didn't have any room for her making mistakes? I think the idea of part 1 was to get across the idea of Kuvira was sort of always like this. She would sort of do these things and then not take responsibility for it. And she did, I think, to a degree, need to learn discipline, like her father says here. But it probably was her parents going too far with it, not understanding the effect that them effectively abandoning her, giving her away, would have on her. So I think it's just meant to be this sort of thing where, like, I suppose Kuvira was punished for her behavior in the past, and because they just gave her away, she just sort of kept up that behavior a little bit. It is now learning that, you know, she needs to move past that. But either way, she radios Sue back in Zaofu, explains the situation that, you know, the Asami, Mako, Bolin were brainwashed, you know, I managed to escape, and Sue's response, of course, over the radio is, brainwashed, you expect me to believe that. And you can see Kuvira here really, really aggressively being like, I'm telling the truth. That it really does upset Kuvira that no one will believe her now. And again, you understand why most of the characters don't. And, you know, she says, I didn't know who else to turn to. Please, I need your help. And that's really all we get with Kuvira and Sue. When Sue actually arrives, they just sort of walk past each other as the airship ramp comes down. They don't say anything to each other. They do later, you know, with Toph, they do like a triple earthbending move, but again, no dialogue is exchanged. Again, once again, setting up the idea that in terms of Kuvira and Sue as a big dynamic, they're saving the big talk that we've sort of been waiting for part 3. And I think that is the ultimate big thing. It's like, if part 3 doesn't deliver on that, because Sue and Kuvira is definitely the big dynamic. That is the one that you, of everything, need to hit the most. They've done all the setup work here. The question now is, will part 3 deliver, or will we be looking back and be like, they should have done more in part 2, they should have done more in part 1, part 3 didn't have the time to do it. But anyway, we move on. So Wu and Korra bring Toph back to Gao, and we find out that, okay, everyone is talking about Commander Guan. The typical line, a vote for Commander Guan is a vote for progress and prosperity, go with Guan, and so on. And they're like, wait, what's going on here? Because they don't know about like the brainwashing just yet. So Toph goes in, signs the paperwork to be, you know, an official candidate for governor of Gao, and she asks, what are my chances? And she's like, if you asked me yesterday, you would have won easily, but practically overnight there's been a groundswell of support for Guan. And Toph is like, okay, that combined with what I saw outside, something suspicious is going on. So they head back to the airfield to find out what's going on. And this is when, you know, they find Pabu. Kuvira drives up to them and reveals that she's not in captivity anymore. Korra, of course, you know, naturally, Kuvira's out, the others aren't there. What have you done, basically? Where are Asami, Mako, and Bolin? Kuvira once again has a situation where she has to try and explain, but Korra like firebends at her. Pretty cool kind of move here. She firebends at her and sort of keeps like a ring of fire around her. Korra's very intense here, and Kuvira just has to be like back down completely and be like, I didn't harm them, I swear. Where are they? What's going on? And she just explains that, you know, they attacked, they waited until you left, I tried to stop them, and Korra's like, don't lie to me. But Kuvira's like, I'm not. Toph, tell her. And of course Toph is like, yeah, she's telling the truth. And interestingly here, like, Korra's like, she is? And how do you know for sure? And Kuvira's like, she's a truth seer. So this was said of Aiwei. Aiwei was a truth seer, and we thought that was like some other thing. But are they just kind of saying that like the ability through like seismic sense to sense if someone is telling the truth is just that you're a truth seer, and that Aiwei was actually doing the same thing rather than like his weird kind of stuff that he had going on? Either way, interesting that they kind of confirm, like, if we want to talk about that ability, it's just, oh, Toph's a truth seer. If you're an earthbender and can sense if people are lying or not, you're a truth seer. So pretty interesting here. But anyway, the brainwashing thing, you know, they figure it all out here. You know that reminds Toph, of course, of the previous brainwashing she saw. It's like Long Feng all over again, and we get a nice sort of flashback panel there to ATLA of Long Feng, King Kui. And interestingly, in the dialogue here, Wu is actually the one who speaks up and says, Long Feng served Earth King Kui, my great-great-grandfather. He and the Dai Li manipulated the Earth King so they could control Ba Sing Se. He brainwashed everyone he saw as a threat. That was an interesting one to me. Like, when I read great-great-grandfather, I just sat there for a few minutes just being like, is that right? That seems like a few too many greats, and that, like, you know, Wu is, I suppose, you know, in or around like Bolin's age, I think. I think the idea is that he's meant to be a little younger than Mako. So like you go back, and so like, okay, his father, and then like you have like 73 or so years. Does this make sense? I think it just about does. Like, ultimately, it's so difficult because we just have no proper information, really, in the grand scheme of things. Um, we just don't know, like, who is like the kid, who is Quay's, like, son or daughter, and like who's after that, and so on. So it's a bit up in the air, but like I think it probably does make sense. The fact that that is a line in there and it says great great, I assume they thought about it enough to make sense. But maybe we could have done with a little bit of an explanation. But anyway, we get to the point here. So Mako, Bolin, and Asami, their minds are no longer their own. They follow Guan's orders now. Guan, at this point, we get a quick page of just him showing that he is aware of where they are now. So he heads out for their airship. And Wu, at this point, basically says, this is a disaster. Guan's going to seal the election, brainwash the entire kingdom. This is my fault. I should have. I never should have asked you all to come. And he knows a way to make this all stop. And so he says, I'm going to call off the election. Toph ultimately just says, yeah, great idea. I didn't want to run anyway. Korra's like, are you sure that's the best strategy? And he just says, it's perfect. Guan can't steal the election if there isn't one. And they seem to settle on that right now. But Kuvira warns them that, like, no, this won't go well. Guan is going to, try and do something here. You can't just go off on your own. We have to plan this out a little bit more. So they're planning to go to Zaofu. At this point, Su arrives with her ship and kind of drops down, of course. Interestingly, as they're arriving down, we do cut to the airship and we see Su and Opal talking. And Opal says, Su actually says, it's important that I bring her in myself. Opal says, after everything that Kuvira's done to our family, all the anguish she's put us through, how can you still have a soft spot for her mom? And Su just says, this isn't the time, Opal. Pilot, bring us down. So I think the scene is meant to get across the idea that Su does have very conflicted feelings about Kuvira. She does view her as a daughter, but can't really, I suppose, equate that with everything that Kuvira actually did. So you can see where the conflicted feelings come from. Again, this is where more backstory and them actually talking is going to be important. But anyway, they come down and they just have a quick, hello Kuvira, I appreciate you coming. And this is when they find out Guan's on his way. Toph's seismic senses it. And before they leave, Korra realizes, no, I have to try and get Mako, Bolin, and Asami back. I'm not leaving without them. So Korra basically just walks out on her own, a big army sort of coming. And Kuvira just kind of says, are you sure this is exactly what you want to do? But Korra stands her ground and says, I'm not going to abandon my friends to that madman. Understood, then I'll help you get them back. So that is a big moment for Kuvira, just like on her own, just basically saying, fine, I will help you to do this. And we get a thank you from Korra, as Su and the others also kind of join them. So it's going to be a big battle out in front of the airship. And this is where I think things go a little awry in the comic. I think this battle isn't laid out particularly well. The reason for it is that a few things happen with regards to the location of characters and how characters move from one place to another, and they just don't cover how some of it happens. Like, this is the layout of the battlefield there. Everyone's on the airship here. They're basically just at the entranceway to the airship right here. Here's Guan's forces coming in here, and this is basically where the battle happens. Fairly small area, just a flat ground right in front of the airship, not too much space to play with. And it's just weird that it feels like there's a few mistakes. It feels a little all over the place. So of course Guan gets out and immediately shows off his new soldiers. Brainwashed Mako, brainwashed Asami, brainwashed Bolin. A very cool kind of reveal here over on this page. As they activate, of course, their powers. Lava bending, the shock glove, and fire bending. As they just say, yes, Commander Guan. Big shocking moment. Korra says, Asami, you can fight this. But Kuvira's like, it's impossible to try and reason with them. So Korra's plan is that they're going to use the metal bender's cables to tie them all up. Opal and Korra will use airbending to sort of group them together so it can happen. And then Toph and Kuvira are going to be, basically playing backup at the rear. So the battle begins, and it's just some quick, attacks being thrown at each other. They grab them with the cables. They try to draw them in, but Guan uses his metal bending to snap the cables, orders his army to charge in. And this is where I think the first weakness of this comes in that Guan is just standing directly in front of the rampway. It's all basically in a line here. So he orders his troops to move in, and all of a sudden, like, he has troops like approaching effectively from the right of the rampway. And so Sue, Toph, and Kuvira, all three of them just abandon guarding the rampway because they have to guard Wu, of course. He's the non-combatant in all of this. He's hiding on the airship. They all just rush off to fight these soldiers, leaving the rampway completely unguarded because, of course, Korra and the rest are distracted trying to get Asami, Mako, and Bolin back. And then they literally just cut a few panels later to a bunch of, like, 4 soldiers just randomly they just casually walk up the rampway and take Wu. As the battle just seems to be going on, like, meters away, like no one was aware that they snuck past them. You do get a pretty emotional moment in all of this of just Bolin confronting Opal, and of course he fires some rocks at her and she tries to block it with airbending, but she takes a hit to the shoulder from Bolin. So that's going to be a pretty interesting one, like when Bolin snaps out of it and finds out that he potentially hurt Opal. Again, like, they're playing on some of these ideas of, like, everyone knows it's not them in their right minds doing it, but as the viewers, like, that this is going to have an impact if anything terrible happens. So that's the situation that we have. Things aren't going right here. Then we get, I suppose, probably the most confusing thing, the one I'd be like, what were they thinking? And that is that Korra and Asami sort of confront each other. And it's nothing to do with this fight. It's nothing to do with this page, really. But the idea is that Korra doesn't want to fight Asami, so she just uses earthbending to lock her feet in place, and then locks her hand into the ground as well to just stop her from moving. And then we cut a few panels later, and it's like, I think it's Kuvira. Just like, this is the only explanation of it. In the background of this shot, you just have, I think it's Kuvira bringing Asami on board the airship. And then they find out at the end that, like, of course, Asami is the only one that they were able to get back. She's still brainwashed. It's just really unclear about how they moved Asami from being trapped in the ground, basically, by Korra, to Kuvira, who was on the other side of the battlefield with, like, Toph and Sue. How did Kuvira end up with Asami? They just don't cover in between panels how that exactly happens. At least with, Opal going down, Wei and Wing are, like, right there. They see it. And so when you cut to a few panels later, you do see Wei and Wing, holding Opal and bringing her on board. It's just a little messy, I think, as a fight scene, and it could have been better laid out. Because I think it is actually a pretty cool layout of the fight scene. It's just this sort of, they have to escape from Guan's forces, but also Korra wants to stay there to get her friends back. And it's interesting to see, Mako, Bolin, and Asami just, in that villain position where they're just saying these really blunt kind of lines. Like, Mako just says to Bolin, bring down that wall, and he immediately just cracks the defensive position that, like, Toph and everyone have. It gets across how powerful Bolin is, that he just, like, he shatters the defensive fortification that, like, Kuvira, Toph, and Sue put up. That gets across how strong he is. So yeah, Korra realizes, okay, that they only have Asami. They're going to have to go. They're going to have to come back for Mako and Bolin later on. But Guan's forces in all of this have captured Wu. So effectively, they're down 1 plus 1. It's still fairly even in all of this. They lost Wu, but they got Asami. What do they do with this? So this is where we get the scene that I know a lot of people are probably going to talk about. It's Korra and Asami talking to each other here with a brainwashed Asami. So, of course, Asami is placed inside the sort of Kuvira holding cell in all of this. And it's interesting because, like, on one hand, this scene could have been done and just it had no impact because Asami's brainwashed. The words coming out of her mouth don't mean anything because they're not hers. Korra is aware of that, but it still has impact because in the grand scheme of things, they've only just got together as a couple. They're still, fairly new as a couple, and so this is sort of Korra's first time seeing Asami in a position like this, and just, I suppose, hearing those type of words come out of Asami's mouth, it's tough for Korra, and I think they do that well enough. It's not the end of the world type moment. The relationship is not in any way at risk, but it still hits a lot of the points that you sort of want it to, and I do like that of just, I'm so sorry about what Guan did to you. Don't pretend you care about me. You're the enemy. You don't know what you're saying, Asami. You don't mean it. Those are Guan's words, not yours, and she has to walk off. So, interesting stuff. In the end, they do say, like, Wei and Wing are like, do you want us to restrain Kuvira too? And Sue just says, no, leave her. She's not a flight risk. Korra goes over to ask Kuvira, okay, is there a way to counter the brainwashing? You were there. So she says, I got a good look at Dr. Sheng's setup. I'm sure there's a way to reverse engineer it, but I won't be able to figure it out alone. I'm going to need Batar Jr.'s help. So that's the big setup going into part 3 in terms of what we're going to need to do. Kuvira is going to have to reunite with Batar Jr. All that drama is going to have to come out, and he is going to have to be the one to sort of turn the tides here. So that's, if we're trying to redeem Kuvira here, it also makes sense that we do the same for Batar, who obviously was manipulated by Kuvira in some ways, but we know there is a connection between the two of them. And the question is, does Kuvira actually, I suppose, love Batar? Did she get him on her side, agree to marry him purely because she needed his skills, or was there actually a dynamic there? Was it just to hurt Sue by taking away one of her family members, or does she actually care? We know in what was it, episode 11, Kuvira's Gambit, I think is the name of the episode, she chooses her plan over Batar. But there was a slight bit of hesitation there, so the feelings there, that's going to be another thing that they have to bring up, and you can tell that sort of Kuvira's a little lost in thought as she says that. Last page of the book is just Wu is now going to be brainwashed, and of course Guan's main lieutenants at this point are Mako and Bolin. So this is going to be a big one because of course Wu was planning to basically end Guan's threat by basically calling off the election. Now all of a sudden the king is going to be supporting Guan. So how do we fix this? So very likely this means that they get away. So we're going to go to get Batar back. Batar should be able to, I suppose, he maybe knows some of Dr. Sheng's research methods. He might get Varric on board. I'm assuming they'll have to get Varric on board because if it relates to sort of magnetism, they sort of got across the idea that Varric is sort of the world expert on sort of energy magnetism type stuff, EMP stuff. And I think we'll see Batar and Varric work together. I think it would be interesting to sort of have that be the case where Batar maybe leads Varric, whereas Varric was the one in charge back in book 4. And we'll see exactly where they go with that. What position Batar is in now of will Batar Sr. get a little bit of a look in, because that was sort of Batar Jr.'s character dynamic was more with his father, of not feeling like an individual because he's just named after his father and they both have similar roles and so on. So it's one of those books where going through it scene by scene, there's a lot going on here actually, and a lot of it is very, very good. It's just, you can sort of tell there wasn't quite the big this is huge type moment as just a reveal from part 2, and it just feels a little disappointing that we always have to just wait for part 3. There can only be something big that happens in part 3 in the recent comics, whereas I think in older comics they could deliver on big moments in part 1s, even sometimes part 2s. Here it is primarily just set up across part 1 and part 2, and I just again hope part 3 is able to deliver and it doesn't reflect poorly on part 1 and 2 that they didn't do enough. Because like there's a lot to go on now here, because like we have Wu captured, we're going to have to get Mako and Boleum back, we're going to have to unbrainwash them, Anasami, plus everyone else back in Gaoling. Wu has to be unbrainwashed. Wu is going to have to make a big decision at the end of this, because I feel the setup just from the Vision of the Swamp has to mean that the elections might not actually happen. Like, there's a reason you put the question in Wu's mind. There's a reason you had him questioning himself of like, is he actually just maybe taking a little bit of the cowardly move by stepping down and just handing things over, like letting the people choose and not making a decision really himself? Is there truth to that or not? Or is it just meant to be a sort of taunting vision from Hu Ting? So there's that still has to happen. And then you have the big character moment of you are going to have Kuvira and Sue have a big scene. Kuvira and Batar have a big scene. I think Kuvira and Asami are going to have a scene as well. Kuvira has to apologize to Asami for killing Hiroshi. That is the unspoken thing between those two characters, as Asami sort of, I think, represents of like Korra's friends, the one who trusts Kuvira the least. So opening that door is going to happen through mentioning Hiroshi, and you know that's going to be very reliant on Asami. More than likely is going to be the first one to be unbrainwashed since they have her captive. So that could be interesting. And I assume once Asami's back, we'll probably get a Korra Asami scene once she's back in her right mind and so on. So, yeah, interesting, like the Wu and Toph stuff. Like, what are they actually going to commit to? What is the future of the Earth Kingdom? But for me, what I'm more focused on is just giving Kuvira the character development that she needs, because she's the centerpiece of Ruins of the Empire. People are buying these books because they want to know what's next for Kuvira. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Ruins of the Empire Part 2. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this book. Podcast review, where myself and Greg will go even more in-depth than I did here, is going to be this weekend, hopefully. So look out for that. But other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.